border. I'm Gaurav Sawant. This special broadcast comes to you from an Israel army location. Right behind me, you see the Markava main battle tanks of the Israeli army locked and loaded, raring to go. All they're waiting for is an instruction from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to go and decimate Hamas at the Gaza Strip. Of course, a task easier said than done. This is day 11 of the Israel-Hamas war. And over the course of the next half hour, we get you details of operations from ground zero. India today is right at the front lines of this war on Hamas terror, and we get you latest reports.
Israel prepares for Gaza ground invasion. Israeli hostages tortured by Hamas. Biden's Israel visit, a tightrope walk. Gaza pushed to brink of collapse.
Israel's operations against the top Hamas leadership. It's to neutralize the leadership, financial bases and weapons manufacturing facilities.
India today at the front line of war. Ground report from the battle zone.
The Israeli army is ready to go in, but the Israeli army is still waiting for instructions. This is day 11 of Israel's war on Hamas terror. US President Joe Biden will be in Israel. The aim is to give diplomacy a chance. Hamas says it has about 200 plus Israeli citizens being held as hostage. Of course, there are also some American citizens who are being held hostage by the Hamas. But given that situation, what will the Israeli army actually go in? Well, the location where we are, they are ready and they're waiting for their instruction. Israel says going into Hamas territory is inevitable. Decimation of Hamas is their aim. But to do that, they still need to ensure that the hostages are brought back safe. Both are top priorities for Israel. Bringing their hostages back home safe and decimating Hamas. But at the same time, the challenge is to ensure that this doesn't develop into a wider Arab-Israel conflict. On day 11 of this conflict, let me bring you a ground report from Kibbutz Be'eri and Kafar Shar. Now, these were some of the localities right at the front lines that were targeted by Hamas terrorists.
The Israel-Palestine war has entered day 11. With every passing day, the ground assault on Gaza appears more imminent. Israeli Defense Force are mobilizing tanks and artillery near the Gaza border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed a total annihilation of Hamas.
Our goal is victory, a crushing victory over Hamas, toppling its rule and removing its threat to the state of Israel once and for all. The conditions for victory, unity and determination. The people are united, the army is united, and the country's leadership is united. So is the national emergency government that we established, and it's good that it was established.
Support continues to pour in for Israel. Their closest ally, America, has vowed support to them, with the US President Biden all set to touch down in Tel Aviv on Wednesday.
The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs. President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't. To that end, he's deployed 2 aircraft carrier groups and other military assets to the region.
Israel is leaving nothing to chance, beefing up their manpower to wipe out Hamas in Gaza.
Israel's operations against the top Hamas leadership. It's to neutralize the leadership, financial bases and weapons manufacturing facilities. Intelligence-based operations continue to be mounted, and the drones, you can hear the drones, you can hear the artillery going off almost every couple of minutes. The drones keep a sight on where the rocket launch sites are and neutralize them the moment they spot a rocket being launched.
Israeli citizens are united in the war against Hamas. It's not just the soldiers, but every ordinary Israeli who is doing their bit to help in this fight against terror.
These are either reservists or even civilians here in Israel who've come to the front lines. They've come to the front lines. They're giving food, water, Coca-Cola, clothes for women soldiers, sanitary pads, tissue papers, other clothes that they may require.
India?
I'm from India. So
Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
From India. So thanks a lot for that.
Not at all. Not at all. So all these people in their big cars, in their Porsches, in their BMWs, in their Mercedes, in their Volkswagen, they've all come forward to be a part of Israel's effort to fight Hamas terror.
In a major victory for Israeli forces, a top Hamas official, Osama Mazzini, who allegedly plotted the attacks on Israel, has been neutralized. As the Gaza Strip is pounded by airstrikes, so is Israel. Hamas hasn't stopped its offensive, firing rockets directly at capital Tel Aviv.
And this is from my hotel window, and you can hear the air raid sirens and people running to take shelter. It's totally deserted. Look at the streets, everything. It's the center of Tel Aviv, and you can see not a single soul on the roads, nowhere. It's just 9 p.m. The streets used to be crowded, full of people at this time of the day. But right now, because of this air raid siren, look at this, everything is totally empty.
After Israeli ordered Gazans to move out to the south, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammad Shatayyeh warned against displacing the people in the Gaza Strip and creating a new catastrophe.
يحذر مجلس الوزراء من الأمر العسكري.
The cabinet warns against the military measure aimed at displacing our people in the Gaza Strip. We affirm that our people will not abandon their land and will not migrate from it, no matter how big the sacrifices are. Our people are capable of confronting and thwarting such schemes, just as they have thwarted numerous liquidation and settlement projects throughout the past decades of struggle.
This is going to be a long-drawn conflict, and Israel this time has vowed they won't stop till every Hamas terrorist and backer is eliminated. With Gaurav Sawant and Rajesh Pawar in Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
The road ahead for Israel is extremely tough. Hamas claims it is holding about 200 to 250 hostages in their territory, and as part of its psychological warfare, PSYOPs, Hamas also released some images of one 21-year-old Israeli-French woman, Mia, who was being held hostage and being treated. Israel says Hamas is a terrorist organization, and this psychological warfare will have absolutely no impact on Israel's war to decimate Hamas. At the same time, the safety of hostages is the responsibility of the Hamas, and that is why they want to absolutely ensure that they're able to get the hostages back. At the same time, decimate launch pads of those rockets and missiles, safe houses for storage of those rockets and missiles, and also the places where those rockets and missiles are manufactured, and Hamas leadership where they stay and operate from, including those many tunnels at the Gaza Strip. We bring you more in this report.
21-year-old French-Israeli by nationality. Mia Shem disappeared from the music festival where 260 people were killed when it came under Hamas attack on October 7th. Nine days later, the Palestinian militant group released her 60-second video. In the footage, an unidentified worker is seen treating Shem's injured arm. In another clip broadcast on Hamas's Telegram channel, Shem speaks directly to the camera in Hebrew. She says she's in Gaza, that she's being looked after. Her arm was operated on for 3 hours at a hospital, and that she wants to go home. Her mother shared her anguish and issued a fervent appeal for her release.
I'm begging the world to bring my baby back home. This is a crime against humanity, and we should all gather and stop this terror and bring everybody back home.
In a separate communication, Hamas claimed to be holding 200 to 250 people as hostages in Gaza. In his televised statement, a Hamas spokesperson said the non-Israeli captive will be released when conditions are ripe. According to the militant group, at least 22 hostages have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza.
Say, Bismillah.
With Hamas showing their capability in asymmetric warfare and avoiding digital trail in their communications, Israel is faced with what probably is the toughest hostage crisis. It has a mixed recording in dealing with such situations. Israel set up a secret force in 1957. The unit shot to fame in 1976 with its raid on Entebbe to rescue hostages from a hijacked plane at a Ugandan airport. In 2011, though, Israel made big concessions to win freedom of one Israeli soldier in Hamas custody. It freed more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for the exchange. And that batch of freedom prisoners included the current Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, one of the masterminds of the October 7th carnage. In the present situation, Israel has been quick to set up a hostage situation room to collate everything about people in Hamas's captivity.
Israel says the responsibility of keeping those hostages safe and out of harm's way is Hamas leadership's responsibility. They're also saying information that 20 to 22 hostages were killed in an Israeli airstrike again is psychological warfare by Hamas, because Hamas leadership had said that they would execute one hostage a day on live TV in case Israel continued to carry out airstrike. Gaurav Sawant in Sderot near the Gaza Strip in southern Israel for India Today.
All eyes right now on diplomacy. So you have US President Joe Biden who's arriving in Israel. He is of the opinion that Hamas has to be punished. At the same time, he's of the opinion that Israel must not occupy the Gaza Strip because this could lead to a wider Arab-Israel conflict. There's also this apprehension with Iran warning of a massive blowback. Iran is warning of Islamic resistance if Israel were to occupy the Gaza Strip. The Hezbollah has already activated the second front or the northern borders. At the same time, the United States has its gunboat diplomacy in place with USS Eisenhower and USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier strike groups in the Mediterranean Sea. The aim is very clear in this war against Hamas terror, Israel's war on Hamas terror. Lebanon, Iran, and other countries should not get involved or there will be consequences. We bring you more on diplomacy before the conflict.
The most powerful man in the world lands in Israel on Wednesday. President Joe Biden arrives in Tel Aviv at a time when Israel's tank regiments are massed along the Gaza frontier, primed and ready to roll in. When he lands, nearly 2 weeks in a historic escalation between the Hamas and Israel, he brings with him a handful of deep anxieties. Biden was unequivocal about his solidarity with Israel from the start.
The bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. among them at least 14 American citizens killed.
Biden's visit to Israel will be an incredibly delicate tightrope walk. As the President of the United States, he must come across as nothing but unambiguously supportive of Israel, empathetic to its anger, and understanding of the steps it is now taking.
It matters that Americans see what's happening. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever... Anyway.
At the same time, with the looming election in the United States, the Israel-Gaza conflict widening into more parts of the Middle East will mean the United States has no choice but to get embroiled.
The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense.
Make no mistake, Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas crisis was the most visible from the get-go. It was on day one itself that he ordered America's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, battle group into waters off the coast of Israel as a show of support, solidarity, and to beef up intelligence assistance to the Israeli military.
Biden's visit to Israel would have strategic importance for entire Middle East.
The world already has one big war on its hands in Ukraine. A second could plunge the world into a crisis that goes beyond just economic. Much of what happens next could be in the hands of the most powerful man in the world. Bureau Report, India Today.
The images behind me tell the story. Soldiers locked and loaded, ready to go. Retribution is their aim. Decimation of Hamas is their aim. But they're equally clear they're doing this with a purpose. And the purpose is to ensure Hamas terrorists can never target Israel or harm Israeli citizens ever again. But is this the lull before the storm? Israel says their aim remains to decimate Hamas, and we will continue to report from ground zero. That is all I have for you on this special broadcast that comes to you from the Israel-Gaza Strip border. Many thanks for watching. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
Situation remains tense at Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Red alert in Jerusalem.
An aggressive confrontation between the police and the protesters. The area remains very tense, extremely volatile in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, at Al-Aqsa Mosque, this is Ashutosh Mishra for India Today.
Pushed to the brink of collapse. Gaza's 2.3 million residents left without power, water, and crumbling health infrastructure. A heart-wrenching reflection of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. A child refusing to leave what was once his family home at Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. Relentless airstrikes making no distinction, as evident from this video. An ambulance in Gaza full of medics and civilians rocked by Israeli bombardment. Emergency crews pulling children from rubble at another location in the besieged enclave. Bodies recovered from a refugee camp. At least 2,778 have been killed and 9,700 wounded in Gaza since the conflict broke out with Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. A combination of devastating Israeli air raids, depleting supplies, and Israel's mass evacuation order for the north of the Gaza Strip has thrown the tiny Gaza Strip into upheaval. According to the UN, more than 1 million people have fled their homes. 60% of them now in approximately 14-kilometer long area south of evacuation zone.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
These Israeli children are still in Hamas captivity in Gaza. More than 10 days later, fate of these kids remains unknown. Shiri, a kindergarten teacher, was seen crying, holding her 2 kids close, 3-year-old Ariel and 9-month-old Kafir, when Hamas extremists surrounded and kidnapped the family. Five-year-old Raz and 3-year-old Aviva Sher were playing in the house when Hamas terrorists took them captive with their mother Doron. A video later emerged of them being loaded onto the truck with other hostages. The husband Yoni Asher traced the wife's mobile phone to Gaza's Khan Yunis neighborhood. A viral video showed 12-year-old boy Erez being pulled away by Hamas from his residence in Kibbutz Nir Oz. The family is unaware of his whereabouts. Among 100 civilians held hostage, more than 15 are children, including infants. Many more are missing. From an Israeli house attack, Hamas terrorists released this video sitting in the backyard of a civilian house. One extremist holding an assault rifle in one hand and an injured toddler in another. A crying infant is seen in the stroller surrounded by the Hamas gunmen. Identities of these children are unknown and continue to be in captivity. A group of Israelis projected images of children hostages at the side of the United Nations headquarters in New York, demanding the release of their loved ones with messages of "Bring them home now." Abducting civilians is a crime against humanity, and Hamas is ISIS. Israeli actress Gal Gadot, known for her role in Wonder Woman, is using her social media platform to share images of abducted children and asking the world to raise awareness to bring the hostages back.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com. You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
Co-powered by PolicyBazaar.com. हर family होगी insured.
Same-sex marriage judgment, the majority opinion. No right to marriage, no right to civil union can only be through law. No right to adopt children. Have right to choose own partner. Transgender persons have a right to marry. Same-sex marriage judgment, minority opinion. No right to marriage, have right to civil union, have right to adopt children. Transgender persons have right to marry. Unanimous verdict, no right to marry. The Supreme Court takes conservative stand on sound legal view.
There is no universal conception of the institution of marriage. It lies within the domain of Parliament and the state legislatures to enact laws recognizing and regulating queer marriage. The court, in the exercise of the power of judicial review, must steer clear of matters, particularly those impinging on policy, which fall within the legislative domain.
Did the top court follow letter of law and not spirit of law? As the top court missed a historic opportunity. Top focus on To The Point this evening. Good evening, you're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Chaudhary. So the question that we're debating this evening, did the topmost court of the country, the Supreme Court, miss a historic opportunity? Well, it was one of the most awaited of judgments of the year. The Supreme Court's 5-judge bench. Mind you, it was a constitutional bench which gave the verdict today, so that makes it all the more difficult to overturn this particular verdict. It was led by Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, and the constitutional bench today refused to grant legal recognition for queer marriages in India. The bench, however, directed the government to form a panel to examine the rights and entitlements of people involved in queer union. Somewhere down the line, could the court have taken a more progressive stand? Did they take a conservative stand, or they just followed the letter of law, missing a historic opportunity? Take a look.
The Supreme Court of India has stopped well short of granting marriage rights to same-sex couple. In a unanimous verdict, a 5-judge bench headed by Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud ruled that the law doesn't allow same-sex marriage.
The Constitution does not expressly recognize a fundamental right to marry. An institution cannot be elevated to the realm of a fundamental right based on the content accorded to it by law.
The top court, while pronouncing the judgment, said it was not possible for the court to frame a law on the issue, can only interpret existing laws. The bench, comprising Justices Chandrachud, S.K. Kaul, Ravindra Bhatt, Hema Kohli and P.S. Narasimha, in the 3-2 majority verdict, decided against allowing civil unions for same-sex couples. The court also declined to allow adoption rights for same-sex couples. The judges said a committee may be formed to look into the concerns of the same-sex couples.
They've all taken the same position on the question of whether the Special Marriage Act can be interfered with and can it be struck down as unconstitutional, whether certain provisions can be struck down as unconstitutional. On that, the bench has agreed that it is for the legislature to look into this particular issue. It's for the parliament to look into this issue.
The verdict is a big blow to same-sex couples who were hoping for at least civil union rights.
आज का जो वर्डिक्ट सुप्रीम कोर्ट का था उसके ऊपर हम लोगों का बहुत उम्मीद था, लेकिन आई थिंक इट हैज़ बीन वेरी वेरी डिसअपॉइंटिंग। पार्लियामेंट के ऊपर ये छोड़ दिया है जो बहुत ही डिसअपॉइंटिंग है। गवर्नमेंट जो डिसीजन लेता है वो मोस्टली वो ह्यूमन राइट्स के ऊपर जो सही जो गलत उसके ऊपर नहीं होता है। उनकी विचार होता है कि किससे ज़्यादा वोट मिले, क्या पॉपुलिस्ट है।
With the Supreme Court ruling against same-sex marriage, the LGBT community will pin their hopes on Parliament passing a law that accommodates them.
The LGBT community is saying that while this is a recognition of their rights and of their existence, it is going to be a long fight ahead to actually get the rights of marriage and the rights that come from the institution of marriage in India. In New Delhi, with cameraman Ridul, This is Anisha Mathur for India Today.
Well, what's really happened is that the petitioners in this case deeply disappointed, especially in the kind of language that the judge, the constitutional bench used. It seemed it's going to be a very progressive verdict. But many would suggest that ultimately it came down to the letter of law, and that is what the court followed. Let's break it down. Let's cut across right now immediately. Joining me in the studio is my colleague Anisha. She was there in court today. What was a red letter day, Anisha, but at least the petitioners deeply disappointed. There is a sense of despondency which seems to emanate from the fact that this was a missed opportunity.
Well, definitely, Preeti. We've been speaking to the lawyers, we've been speaking to the petitioners. All of them are saying that, well, we were hoping that the court will go a little bit further than it did, especially with the minority verdict of the Chief Justice and Justice Kaul, talking about civil unions at least being given some sort of recognition in the country. That is where the hopes had been pinned, that something like that could be created. But even in that, we need to remember that the court has said that even if we do give recognition to something on the lines of a civil union, the actual rights, the actual regulations that the petitioners want a change in is something that will require legislative work to be done, because this will require change in multiple laws. But on a more hopeful note, the issue that the petitioners are also saying is that at least this conversation is happening. At least there is a recognition that we not only exist, but we deserve and we have fundamental rights of dignity, privacy, choice. And that is something, at least one step has been taken towards recognition.
Let's quickly bring in the petitioners, because they've been fighting the good fight for years now. Joining me is Harish Iyer, petitioner. He was a petitioner today, disappointed, I understand. Zainab Patel, petitioner, disappointed. Zainab, I want to begin with you. It's been a long, drawn-out battle where the fight for equal rights is concerned, especially when it came down to equality in marriage. What do you make of the judgment today, especially the kind of conversation that happened earlier in terms of what the Chief Justice of India said? But ultimately, do you only look at the fine print, which said not allowed?
Thank you. I think I'm going to just say something which might sound very harsh, but that is the truth and the reality. A lot of words were used, but very little meaning came out of those words. Very insightful, very wise words, but they are like wise words in an old book. My personal viewpoint is that the Supreme Court abdicated its responsibility towards the LGBTIQ community, although we do see some wins for the trans community and in some way an executive committee looking at some rights within the institutional framework of a partnership or a union. But again, that's subject to how the government is going to play it out. What is the time frame? What is the duration that would be required to set up something like this? But to be very frank, I just feel that here was this momentous occasion in the history of time to backroll any of the negativity that was thrown towards the community. And as someone who's been involved both in the Nalsa judgment as well as in the marriage equality case, I felt that this opportunity was lost. However, I'm not one of those who will get bogged down by this. My community is known to be strong and resilient. We will fight back. We will ensure whatever gains we made, there will be a larger outplay of this.
Zainab, I'm going to just come in for a minute, and the reason I'm doing so is because I know a lot of you are deeply disappointed. So many of our guests, we were going to have a lot of petitioners today. They're crushed, devastated in terms of what has happened today. But I want to ask you, looking at where the law stands, what did you think that the courts could have done better in terms of interpreting the law?
See, the only thing that I really expected today, without being too frivolous or too over-expectant about the court, was the fact that a clear roadway towards civil unions would have come true. I was expecting that as a minimum guarantee, considering the months of effort put by all of us in arguing our case. That was a real-time disappointment because that framework is absolutely absent in any of the directions given by the Supreme Court in their 300-odd page order.
Right. Okay. Harish Iyer, At least, some would suggest a conversation has started where you talk about not just what a marriage means, but the modalities that go into the marriage where rights of spouses come into question.
I think the conversation has moved ahead. The conversation has been moving ahead, and the conversation is moving not because of anything else, but because of the LGBTQI plus community by itself. I think, as Zainab rightly said, the court could have. This was a momentous occasion where the court could have. All the wrongs that have been happening with the LGBTQI plus community, this was an opportunity to correct all of that, to at least provide a pathway to some kind of legalization where if my partner was dying in a hospital bed, I would be given some rights, at least guaranteed by law, that I could take decisions for them. I think this was a moment where we could have done really well. And again, it might sound really harsh, but it was all a play of beautiful words strung together in strings of hope. But we are tired of hope. We just don't want to keep hoping. We want to start hopping into a new future, start hopping into a world where our rights and our love is recognized. For now, we just have the right to have consensual sex with our partners in private. We hardly have got any other right in this country, but we are not going to be tired. We are not going to be bogged down. We are going to fight this out, and we are going to not rest until we have absolute and equal rights as our heterosexual cisgender counterparts.
We do apologize somewhere down the line because, we understand your pain, and it is a long, protracted legal battle which lies ahead, especially, Anisha, where I bring you in. This is it's a constitutional bench. To overturn something like this is difficult, but how do you see it once again come into the purview of law? Because from here on, the court has said that a committee needs to be formed, that it's in the ambit of the parliament. But we all know, cutting across party lines, no party will actually come out and back equal rights, especially when it comes down to marriage. We've seen how the center has reacted, where at one level they actually called homosexuality an urban concept.
Well, see, the unfortunate reality of the world and the country that we live in is that a lot moves only when there is a vote bank or a pressure group or some sort of benefit to a political party involved. And that is the unfortunate reality we live in. What I'm looking at this, however, and hope springs eternal, as they say, at least the idea that there must be protection accorded to these relationships, at least that has now come out in a Supreme Court verdict. Yes, the problem here is that there is no timeline. The problem here is that we don't know when, if, how it will happen. But at least it is become a part of a general conversation. At least there is a Supreme Court verdict saying you must do this. So now
But but it falls short, Anisha, because, let's look at it. Were we expecting the court to give, rights where marriage was concerned to the LGBTQIA plus community? Not quite, because they could have said it's in the ambit of law. What could the court have done? They could have, at least where it came down to civil union, they could have, made more changes in that, or, stressed on that more, and at least give a time frame to the committee that they've asked the government to form. Hitesh Jain, I'll bring you in. Advocate, Supreme Court lawyer, is also with us. How do you look at the ruling? All right, we don't have Hitesh Jain, but, Anisha, if you'd want to take that question.
See, speaking about the law and the legal provisions, yes, the court could have done more. What the minority judgment has said, for example, with respect to civil unions and the right to enter into a civil union, that could have been done. But then again comes the question of the letter of the law, and that is where this entire debate of what can the Supreme Court really have done, that is where it sort of hinges, that could the Supreme Court have redefined what husband and wife means? Could they not have created a new relationship of a civil union? Could they not have at least said, well, this exists, so you must recognize it?
Zainab, is that why you feel let down? Because at least when it came down to civil union, it was the rights that you were looking at, maybe not the sanctity of it, or at least right now, not the sanctity of it. Zainab, that's questions for you. Harish, can you take that question? I don't think Zainab can hear me.
I think what we were looking for is a passage to the right towards civil unions. I mean, in the sense, what is marriage? If you remove if you look at the Hindu Marriage Act, the Muslim Marriage Act, you look at all the marriage acts, it's basically a legal contract between two people. Even if there was a pathway to a legal contract, where there's some sort of legal recognition to a relationship, call it civil union, call it whatever good word that we could choose for it. But if there was some sort of a legal contract, pathway to a legal contract between two people that they could get into, it would have been beautiful. Because what really are we fighting for? We are really fighting for not just the right to sing "Hum Aapke Hain Kaun," have "Hum Aapke Hain Kaun" kind of weddings. That's not the right that we are fighting for. We are already having "Hum Aapke Hain Kaun" type weddings. LGBT people are having those weddings. We are asking for legal recognition of those relationships. So if there was a pathway, some sort of a pathway towards the legal recognition. And seriously, the other thing that I also wanted to stress on is the Supreme Court has done exactly what the Navteej Singh Johar judgment, the directive to the government was that you need to create more awareness, you need to ensure that there's less prejudice. Those were the same directives that were given to the government. There's the same history repeating itself. You are just giving directives over directives, but not having any. There is no timeline to it. There is no plan to it.
Right. Harish, stay with me. I want to bring in Hitesh Jain into this conversation, advocate, Supreme Court. Hitesh Jain, you said you call this the verdict historic. Why so? Because especially where the petitioners are concerned, they're deeply disappointed because we were standing at the cusp of history and we just didn't take that leap.
Well, I don't think you have to look at this judgment only from the lens as to who has got what and who is not getting anything. First thing, as far as the doctrine of separation of powers is concerned, I think we have made a progress where the Supreme Court has said that in a strict sense, we do not follow the doctrine of separation of powers, but we recognize the essential functions of one arm of the state. And as far as the essential functions doctrine, which was introduced today by the Supreme Court has clearly stated that one arm of the state will not encroach upon the essential function of another arm. Second, this judgment also, we have seen, one can see and a progress has been made. This case was not about for or against case for the LGBT. As far as the government of the day is concerned, the government clearly recognized the rights and acknowledged the rights that flowed, as the earlier speaker was mentioning, that was given by the Supreme Court in the Navteej Singh. The government has acknowledged the right. The only question that was pending before the court, and which is the most important question, whether the Supreme Court can grant such rights or such rights have to be granted by the legislature. As far as the right to queer is concerned, it is a very important recognition the Supreme Court has given, and unanimously all the 5 judges have recognized the rights of queer, the rights that they are entitled, basic domestic rights, basic fundamental rights have been acknowledged and have been respected. The only thing what the Supreme Court has done today is they are saying that as far as all the other rights are concerned, it does not come within our domain. You have to go to the parliament. The parliament is the right and the appropriate forum. And therefore, it is the parliament which is an important stakeholder. The Supreme Court has also taken on record about the suggestion that was made by the government of the day when the Solicitor General made a statement that a committee headed by a cabinet secretary will be appointed, which will look into all the issues and then take a proper informed decision. So I think we have made a progress. It's and therefore I say this is a historic verdict.
But, the petitioners don't see it as historic. But let me bring in Karuna Nandi into this conversation. Karuna Nandi, where did we fall short, where the Supreme Court ruling today was concerned? The petitioners were hoping history would be made, but having said that, if the top court hadn't touched the issue of marriage, could they have done more on civil union?
What we were hoping, and we were hoping for at the very least, was a declaration that there is a constitutional right for queer people to be married, and for then that to be taken forward in future decisions or in future legislations. Now, 2 judges have made that finding. They have not said that there is a fundamental right to marry, but they have said that there are particular aspects of marriage that find themselves rooted in Article 21, in Article 19, and for example, the Article 14 analysis of the CARA guidelines with regard to the ability and the right of queer parents to adopt as a couple is rooted in Article 14, and there is a very robust analysis of that. So, and I encourage law students and lawyers to look at that, and indeed I encourage the government to look at that, because the object of when 2 of the most senior judges of the Supreme Court say that there is nothing to show that queer parents are not as loving and that as heterosexual parents, that they provide as safe an environment, that these children have a right to respect and dignity and the same rights that other children have, then I think that at the very least, the government should sit up and listen. Now, what the court has done today, and these are small gains, and I just want to also be clear that we have not gone backwards. We have gone forwards, though the steps are far smaller than our petitioners hoped for. However, queerness has been recognized. There was a lot of talk of same-sex marriage in which non-binary and trans people were being ignored. So queerness and the concomitant rights that come with being a human being of any sexuality, there is a sort of broad, abstract recognition, I think, across the board of those rights. The disagreement comes where 2 judges have said that the right to marry is rooted in some constitutional rights, and the other 3 do not agree. But all seem to agree that this is a matter of statute for various legislatures, something, of course, that the petitioners disagree with. In particular, for example, our written submissions, and we briefly touched upon these arguments, as well as Saurabh Kirpal, that Section 15 to 18 provides an entire code where sex is not even mentioned, and nothing needed to be read down, nothing needed to be read in, and just a declaration would have sufficed. However, the right of trans people, when they are of opposite chosen genders, to marry has been recognized. The right and modalities of protecting queer couples against false, illegal action by non-state actors, as well as against criminal cases, that has been recognized. There is encouragement by Justice Kaul to look at an anti-discrimination law, and that is really the need of the hour. It's extremely important.
Right. But Ms. Nandi, I'll ask you one quick question before, because we have to close the show soon. So I want to ask you, what's the way forward legally now? So, how do you proceed as a lawyer of the petitioners, and how do they proceed if they want to keep the good fight going?
Well, at the moment, really, the ball is in the court of the legislatures. And let us remember that this includes the state legislatures. The state legislatures and the Congress, the other parties that are in and out of power, the DMK, the BJD, all have, under the Constitution, powers over health, for example. So, for example, a government order or a notification can be issued to say that you must, when a queer person appoints their partner to make decisions over their health when they are incapacitated and they can't make these decisions, then the natal family that rejected them in the first place and that they haven't seen for years cannot be the people that make these decisions for them. Right. There are many things that can be done, and there are many things that can be done today.
Right.
Since the union government is speaking in a sympathetic voice, the union government can do the same. It is incumbent, I think, on all the legislatures.
But the union government, Ms. Nandi, had been of the view that homosexuality is an urban concept in any case. Having said that, I want to go back to the two petitioners, Harish Iyer, Zainab Patel. Zainab Patel, with what Ms. Nandi was also stating, do you have faith in the legislature to actually, go ahead and follow, at least in spirit, what the Supreme Court asked of it?
I think as a commoner, I will have to put some trust into the legislature before, because this is a step now in their court. I will work with them like the way we did when the expert committee on transgender issues was set up in the early 2012, 2013. We are willing to work with the government to make sure that at least some of the rights within the framework of a union, a civil union or partnership, is made available to desirous couples. The rest in terms of the next legal roadmap will have actually be determined once we speak to a larger cohort of lawyers, etc., in terms of what is it that we could do in the next step. And of course, as Karuna rightly mentioned, we will have to work with other parties in powers and state to look at if the states can step in to bring in marriage reforms or laws that can actually help LGBTIQ people enjoy the full rights of marriage equality.
Harish Iyer, do you have faith in the legislature, especially with the kind of conversation that has gone down? No political party would really want to put, or at least we've seen in the recent part, put their weight behind your cause.
That's not absolutely true, though. There are some people who have put their weight around us. We have had Supriya Sule speak about it. We have had Jagdambika Pal from the BJP who has spoken. Now we have no other choice but to go to the legislatures to further our advocacy. The elections are coming, so it'll be a good time to tell them as well that you'll get our votes. We are 17% of the population. You'll get our votes only if you stand up with us.
Just 10 seconds if I can get Karuna back into this conversation. Karuna, away from, the legislature, legally, what's the way forward now?
Well, we're going to have to look at the judgment's nitty-gritties. It only came out about half an hour ago. And look at what can be done in the interstices. Look, there are various queer rights aside from marriage that have been recognized by this set of judgments. That's a place that additional work can be done. And I wouldn't say that the legislatures should be, binned en masse, right? They are, after all, democratic representatives of all our people. And the state legislatures are very important sites of these protections. And if these parties are going to say that they are a real alternative, then let them demonstrate that.
Okay, I'm running terribly out of time. I appreciate all of you for joining us. Thank you there. So, yes, we were standing at the cusp of history. We didn't quite take that leap, but does that mean we're not going to take it in the coming future? Well, I'm sure we will. It's going to be a long fight, and the petitioners will continue to fight that good fight. Thank you for joining us. A quick break up next, Rahul Kamal.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
pushed to the brink of collapse. Gaza's 2.3 million residents left without power, water, and crumbling health infrastructure. A heart-wrenching reflection of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. A child refusing to leave what was once his family home at Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. Relentless airstrikes making no distinction, as evident from this video. An ambulance in Gaza full of medics and civilians rocked by Israeli bombardment. Emergency crews pulling children from rubble at another location in the besieged enclave. Bodies recovered from a refugee camp. At least 2,778 have been killed and 9,700 wounded in Gaza since the conflict broke out with Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. A combination of devastating Israeli air raids, depleting supplies, and Israel's mass evacuation order for the north of the Gaza Strip has thrown the tiny Gaza Strip into upheaval. According to the UN, more than 1 million people have fled their homes. 60% of them now in approximately 14-kilometer long area south of evacuation zone.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
The Israel-Palestine conflict is back in news with the worst attack that Israel has faced since its creation, making Gaza Strip a war zone. Here we give you a backstory to what and why of the current escalation. A sudden and shocking assault on Israel this past October 7th, a date which was meant to mark the joyous celebration of Simchat Torah. As the nation was in a festive mood, Hamas launched an unparalleled attack on Israeli territory, breaching its land, water and air, firing a barrage of rockets, indulging in ground assault and taking hostages, Israelis and foreign nationals. A grim reminder of the Yom Kippur attack from half a century ago.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way.
The Israeli defense, renowned for its Iron Dome system, which has consistently intercepted over 90% of rockets, found itself overwhelmed. Not only did rockets rain from the sky, but the Mediterranean Sea, a natural barrier, was no longer safe. Hamas defied the long-standing naval blockade, landing on Israeli shores. But the true shocker was Hamas's audacious air strategy. Hamas militants took to the skies using powered hang gliders, bypassing the air defenses and infiltrating Israel. The rapid assault resulted in heavy casualties. With the nation reeling, Israel responded.
No food, nowhere to live, and everyone is attacking us. And they destroyed our homes. We can't live like this.
The loss in Gaza has already started mounting. Airstrikes have been carried out on Hamas's positions in Gaza, signaling the beginning of a full-blown conflict. But the true impact of such a war is seen on the civilians. In Gaza, homes have been pulverized, major blockade of food, water and electricity, and borders shut. The Palestinians in Gaza have nowhere to go.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
Presented by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, Growing Legacies.
Co-presented by Century Laminates by Manish Malhotra, fashion for your furniture.
Co-presented by Macho Hind, Bade Aaram Se.
Co-powered by PolicyBazaar.com, Har family hogi insured. Co-powered by The Bold Look of Kohler. Kirloskar.
Good evening and welcome. You're watching the news track. I'm Rahul Kamal. The Israel Defense Forces getting set for an all-out ground offensive on the Gaza Strip. On the news track tonight, 4 leading international military strategists will be joining me to give our viewers a sense of what to expect when this phase of urban battle begins. How long is it likely to go on for? How hard will the Hamas be able to fight back? And will this battle likely escalate to include the Hezbollah, Syria and Iran? All that and more coming up on the news track.
Endgame Gaza. But invasion won't be easy. Will Israel be trapped in brutal urban warfare? Hamas may have already war-gamed this. Past invasions have backfired. What happens next? That is a big focus on News Track.
On the news track tonight, Gila Gamliel, key confidant of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, senior minister in the Israel government, the Minister for Intelligence, will be joining me on the news track. The first minister from the government of Israel to speak to an Indian news channel after this conflict began. Gila Gamliel coming up on the news track tonight. Israel has declared that it is working towards endgame Gaza and that it will not rest till the Hamas has been decimated. But even as Israeli forces prepare for an all-out ground offensive, it won't be that easy. The Israel Defense Forces risk falling into the Hamas's trap of brutal urban warfare. At India Today, we try and decode what to expect next and how this phase of urban warfare is likely to pan out.
Devastated by Israeli bombardments, more than 1 million Gazans have fled their homes as an Israeli ground invasion looms. Airstrikes have been unchallenged. In the face of no credible anti-aircraft weapons or air defense systems at Hamas's disposal, destruction in the besieged Gaza Strip unprecedented. 2,670 Palestinians have been killed and 9,600 wounded since the fighting erupted on October 7th. More than 1,400 Israelis have died, most of them civilians killed in the Hamas attack. Casualties may mount dramatically in the event of Israeli forces launching a ground incursion. Much of Hamas's military infrastructure believed to be concealed in urban areas. A street-by-street fighting can't be ruled out if Israeli military unleashes a full-fledged ground assault. Israel has ordered more than 1 million Palestinians, almost half the territory's population, to move to Gaza's south. Hamas has called upon Palestinian residents to stay put. In the past, Israeli forces invaded Gaza twice. The first time in 2009 for 15 days, and then in 2014 for 19 days. When Israeli ground forces advanced into Gaza's dense cities earlier, they've been effectively targeted with Hamas anti-tank mines, anti-tank guided missiles, rocket-propelled grenades. Hamas now equipped with a newer weapon, grenade-wielding drones it used in the October 7 attack, and possible stockpiles of anti-tank weaponry. International urban warfare experts also caution against Hamas's ancient tactic of using tunnel bombs. Blasting its way through the 40-kilometer Gaza Strip may sound easier than done. The Israeli military would be going up against a group that has trained for years in hardened urban combat and possibly war-gamed such an invasion for years, despite Israel's own human intelligence and technology. With Gaurav Sawant and Ashutosh Mishra in Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
The Israel Defense Forces currently preparing for a ground assault on the Gaza Strip. How is this urban warfare phase of this battle likely to go? How long could it take for the IDF to be able to take over the Gaza Strip? What kind of military pushback should they expect from the Hamas, which has been pulverized over the last 10 days from the air by the Israel Air Force? Joining us, four very sharp military strategists. I want to welcome first Colonel Liam Collins, founding director at the Modern War Institute, the United States Military West Point Academy. We've got Yaakov Lapin, a well-known military strategic affairs analyst and expert.